Onet.xml file, it provides the implementation details of a site definition in a manner similar to an element manifest. In fact, you'll notice there's a lot of overlap in the XML elements that you can specify in each one. There's feature associations, document templates, navigation elements. You can define list instances, files. So basically what you can configure are site collection features, and then web collection features, list instances, and then outside of those individual configurations, that's where you would define the document templates, modules, navigation elements. And then within, obviously, just like features, within a module, that's where you actually put the files, as well as the navigation elements. And then you can also put contents of web part zones and web part pages. So basically, what you could actually deploy a page with a web part on it that's provisioned, so it's already configured with its properties set. The root element of every Onet.xml file is project. Its attributes are title. That's basically just the default name for sites that use the definition. It's required. List dir that's the parent URL of lists created on the site, and that's required. And then, so pretty much you'll never want to change that. Just always leave the default list directory to be lists, because that's how pretty much every single site in SharePoint works. Alternate CSS, that attribute lets you specify an alternate to the core.css file, and it's optional. Custom JS URL, it allows you to specify a custom JavaScript file that will be rendered by the custom JS URL web control. Again, this one is optional as well. So you can have site logo URL, site logo description. These are optional again, but you can specify, if you want to have like a hard-coded logo configured. And in most cases, you'll probably just leave it and let the user figure that one out for themselves. And then UI version. So you could have 4 for 2010, or whatever level you want. It's 2010 it only goes back to 2010, so it's either going to be 2010 or it's going to be 2013, and it's not defined in the schema. Okay, next is the NavBars element. The NavBars collection contains templates. So it's actually the initial contents of the top link bar and quick launch. It contains templates that contain those items. The navbar element specifies the menu. Every time you add a navbar element, you're adding a menu item basically. And in this case, it's for the top nav. You could also do it for libraries, specifying whether or not you want them to show up on quick launch. And the same thing for lists. And a navbar page element specifies a single menu element. And the way you would do that would be to use the navbar page element within a module. Next up is the document templates element. The document templates element specifies the document templates that are available to users when they create a new document library. And you could optionally specify an actual template file, like a DOT file or DOTX. And out of the box, it's going to include the standard ones for Word and Excel and PowerPoint. Team sites templates are located in the 15 Hive under Template 1033 STS.temp. And then the selected template is placed in the Forms subfolder on List Provisioning. So every list that you provision always has a Forms folder, and so your template is going to get placed inside that Forms folder. Next element is the Modules element. Modules element is just like the Modules element for features, where it's used for provisioning files. you can specify one or more files to provision on a site via one or more file elements. If the file is a web part page, you can add some different child elements to specify the contents of the individual web part zones. So in this case, you could specify a list view and a web part zone. This is the most interesting, I think, is the all users web part element. That's also similar to when you're provisioning page layouts. You can use this as well if you want to provision a page that has web parts already pre-configured on it. So the C.data.xml of the web part, that's the XML file that gets stored in the web part gallery. So when you create a web part in Visual Studio, you're actually creating that that webpart.xml file. That's what goes in that C.data.xml. And so it allows you to define what web part it is, using the assembly element or attribute. I forget which one it is, but you can define the actual class and assembly of the web part, as well as all the different public properties on the web part. You can't just put a web part on a page. You can't just copy it. It's not going to work. You have to use the C.data.xml of the web part. Okay, the configurations element, that is for supporting name variations within a site definition. So each configuration is indicated by an ID that has to match an ID specified in the web template. So in our case, in the lab in the demo that I just did, I showed configuration ID of 0, and that one has to match an ID that's in the web template. So that's how you support the variations within a site definition. So for example, for out of the box webtemp.xml file for the team site for STS, that template, it has configurations for team site, blank site, and document workspace. And then you can vary after that. You can put in whatever list instances, features, and modules you want after that. So that gives you some flexibility. Next we have feature elements. And what this is it allows you to, for every configuration, you can specify site scoped features within the site features element. So site features are going to be corresponding to the site collection, and web features are going to be corresponding to the site. So think SP site for site features and SP web for web features. And if you're missing any features, so if you're specifying a feature that's supposed to be there and it's not there, then your site will not get provisioned. Create an error and site definition is not going to work. So next is the list element. Configuration elements can also contain a lists element that contains a collection of list elements. And the process of defining a list in a site definition is very similar to defining a list instance in a feature. So the definition requires the identifier of the feature ID, and then the type within the feature, as well as a URL and the name. And you're also allowed to, you can provision not just the list, but you can actually provision some actual data with the list, as well as defining the, if you want it to show up on the quick launch URL, as well as versioning configuration. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the Onet.xml file, and we're going to add some behavior to it, and we're going to actually extend the site definition that we created in the previous demo. Okay, we're back in our Visual Studio project again and have the Onet.xml file opened up. And I'm going to go ahead and modify the project element. And I'm going to change the lister from empty to lists, because that's where standard practice of putting the lists are. And then next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some navigation. We're going to add a top navigation bar. And we'll give it a name. We'll just call it my top nav. Don't forget to close that out. And then I'm going to add for the home page, for the default.aspx, I'm going to add a navbar page element here. Its name is going to be home. Position is equal to start. So what that's going to do, that's going to create, and I need to close out that element. Let me just make sure I don't have that site collection already existing. So let me go to Web Applications, delete a site collection, change site collection, and it's not there. Okay, that's good. Okay, so, whoops, didn't mean to close Visual Studio there. Okay, we're ready to deploy this. Should finish up here in a second. Okay, now we'll start up Central Administration. Go to Create Site Collections. Okay, make sure we choose our custom site definition. And we'll let that create itself. So it's going to provision our site again based on that site definition. And we're adding a top nav element now to the site. So when this renders, when this the provisioning finishes here, we should be able to go to our new site, and we should see a top nav bar that says home. And when we click it, it should take us to our home page, which is that default.aspx page. Okay, let's go ahead and navigate to the page. And as you can see, here's our top nav element right here, and it's linked to our home page right there. So this is our default.aspx page. So that's all well and good. Let's go ahead and close that. And let's go back to, let's just delete that site collection. Okay, that's good. Now let's add a few more things. So our navigation doesn't really have much, right? So we're going to add a few more things to our NavBars collection. So I'm going to add and I'm going to copy these. We're going to add, these are special identifiers in SharePoint. Okay. And you'll see in a second what these end up being. But this is basically the quick launch or left-hand navigation. So we're just adding some stuff to the quick launch here by doing that. And then I'm also going to add another nav bar. And we'll just call it my heading. And then in here we're going to put a navbar link. So it's just a custom link. Name, we'll call it permissions. And the URL. It's going to go layouts 15 hive user.aspx. Make sure we close out that. By the way, if you don't close it out, it'll create the site for you, but then when you try to go to this, well, it could either create the site for you, and then when you go to the site, it won't render, or it won't even create the site at all. So make sure you have your XML form properly. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to retract that old solution. And we can deploy this one. And let's create our site collection again. Okay, looks good. Okay, we'll wait for that to provision. So while we're waiting for that, this should add several items to the quick launch. You'll see links for lists, libraries, pictures, and then we should see our My Heading entry with the permissions link underneath it. Okay, that worked, so let's go to the site now. Okay, you can see here's all the quick launch links that have been added, and here's our My Heading link that we added, the navbar link. Actually, that was it's a navbar with a navbar link. And if we go to permissions, it'll take us to permissions for the site. Okay, so now let's close that. Click OK here. That's our error page that we got before. And let's just delete that site collection again. That's deleted. Great. Now let's retract it. Okay, so actually I want to go back to that. Well, never mind that. Right now on the list, or right now on our site, I deleted that, so it doesn't exist anymore. But basically, it's pretty empty because we created this off of the blank site definition, and we didn't really add anything to it. So we tried to create a list, we couldn't. There's no list or library templates. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cheat and copy them out of the 15 hive for the STS team site definition. So let's go 15 template, site templates, and where's STS? There we go. We'll go to the XML and we'll open up Onet. And in this one I'm going to copy the site features and web features first. Okay, I'll copy those. And let's go back here to our site features, web features. Just highlight those. Just copy over them. And now let's just go ahead and deploy this again. We'll create a site again. create our site collection again using the template. Wait for that. Okay, now we'll go to the site. And notice how we have this site pages library got provisioned because of the feature. And we actually have our, let's go back to the home page again. We're using the, so this page, I don't know if you can see that. Can't really see that. Let's go to the libraries, the site pages library. This is the new home page now that was just created. And so this is what got set to be the home page of the site. So that's a wiki page that we just put into our site definition, and that feature got activated, and it made the home.aspx page our home page for the site. So now we should actually, let's do site contents, and we'll go to add an app. And notice how these were not here before. This was, everything was blank before, but because we activated the team collab feature, so back in code here, this feature right here, team collab feature, that feature has all the standard lists and libraries for a team site, and so that's why they're here now. The wiki page library, the announcements, contacts, calendar, all that good stuff, survey, discussion board. So what I'm going to do here is create a document library. And let's just call it test docs. So you can see in this demo we were able to create a site definition from really basic Onet.xml file. And then what we did was we added some extra behavior to the Onet.xml file. We added a feature from the team site definition, and we brought in the feature that creates the list templates. So we added those list templates to our site definition, and from there it allows us to be able to go in and create instances of those lists, whereas before we just had a pretty empty Onet.xml file, and so when we created a site it didn't have any of that functionality.